My name is Emilio Ramirez, 68 years old, and I spent my entire life working hard to provide for my family. After my wife passed away, I bought a large house in the suburbs for my 3 children and me to live comfortably. Years went by, my kids grew up, but I still paid all the bills even after retirement. Then one day, they suddenly kicked me out of my own home with cold eyes and cruel words. What they didn't know was that I had a plan that would teach them a lesson they would never forget. If you're watching this right now, let me know where you're tuning in from. Hit that like button and subscribe to follow my journey of standing up for myself when my own flesh and blood betrayed me. For 40 long years, I worked in construction. I started as a simple laborer, carrying materials and cleaning up job sites. Over time, I worked my way up to becoming a supervisor, managing crews on large commercial projects across the state. The work was physically demanding, often leaving me with aching muscles and a tired body, but I never complained. Every dollar I earned was for my family. My wife Maria was the love of my life. We met at a community dance when we were both in our 20s. She was a kindergarten teacher with a smile that could light up any room. We built our life together, had 3 beautiful children, and planned for a long future. But life had other plans. When Thomas was 14, Sophia 12, and Aaron just 10, Maria was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. Within 8 months, she was gone, leaving me to raise our children alone. The night after her funeral, I made a promise to myself and to Maria that I would never remarry. My focus would be entirely on our children, making sure they had everything they needed to thrive despite losing their mother. This wasn't just a promise made in grief. It was a commitment I kept for decades. To keep our family afloat, I worked overtime whenever it was available. On weekends, I took side jobs renovating kitchens and bathrooms for extra income. During summer breaks, I would bring Thomas along to job sites to teach him the value of hard work, though he showed little interest in construction. Instead of spending money on myself, I put every spare dollar into savings accounts for their college education. When Thomas graduated high school and got accepted to State University, I couldn't have been prouder. 2 years later, Sophia followed, choosing to study business administration. Aaron, my youngest, eventually went to a private college to study computer science. I paid their tuition in full, not wanting them to start adult life burdened with student loans like so many of their peers. By the time I turned 55, I had saved enough to buy our dream home. It was a 4-bedroom colonial in a nice suburban neighborhood with good schools, even though my children were grown by then. The house had a large backyard with mature oak trees, a spacious kitchen where I could cook Sunday dinners, and enough room for everyone to have their own space. I paid for it outright with the money I had saved over decades of hard work. No mortgage, no loans. It was mine, free and clear. Despite the physical distance that grew as they pursued their education, I made sure our family traditions remained intact. Every Thanksgiving, we gathered around the dining table I had built myself. For Christmas, I decorated the house just as Maria would have, hanging the ornaments the children had made in elementary school. During summer breaks, I took time off work to organize family vacations to the beach or national parks, creating memories I thought would last a lifetime. As each of my children graduated college, they moved back home temporarily while looking for jobs. Temporary turned into permanent as they found reasons to stay. Thomas landed a job at an accounting firm 30 minutes away. Sophia started working for a marketing company downtown. Aaron found remote work as a software developer. None of them mentioned moving out, and I never pushed the issue. Having them close felt right, like keeping a piece of Maria with me. When I turned 65, my body couldn't handle construction work anymore. Decades of physical labor had worn down my joints and strained my back. I retired, living on my modest pension and Social Security. Even then, I continued paying all the household expenses: property taxes, utilities, groceries, internet, streaming services, even their cell phone bills. I never asked them to contribute, seeing it as my continuing duty as their father. For a while, things seemed good. We had family dinners most evenings, though increasingly my children would be late or absent due to work commitments or social engagements. I didn't mind cooking for whoever was home, always making extra in case someone arrived hungry later. I kept the house clean, did everyone's laundry, and maintained the yard. It gave me purpose in retirement. Looking back, I should have noticed the subtle changes in their behavior. The way Thomas would sigh when I asked about his day. How Sophia rolled her eyes when I suggested weekend activities together. Aaron's increasing silence at the dinner table, his attention fixed on his phone. But I chose to see what I wanted to see, a family that was still whole despite our loss. I ignored the warning signs that something was shifting in our family dynamic, something I wouldn't be able to ignore for much longer. The first clear sign that things were changing came when my children started bringing friends over without telling me. I would be in the kitchen preparing dinner, when suddenly voices would fill the living room. Thomas would lead a group of colleagues from his accounting firm into the house, barely acknowledging me as they passed by. They would take over the living room I had so carefully maintained, leaving beer bottles and takeout containers scattered across the coffee table I had built by hand. Sophia was even worse. She began hosting what she called networking events in our backyard. 20 or 30 young professionals would descend upon our home, turning the peaceful garden where I grew tomatoes and peppers into a noisy social venue. When I asked her to give me advance notice, she dismissed my concerns with a wave of her hand. "Dad, you need to be more flexible," she said, as if it was my fault for wanting to know when my home would be filled with strangers. Our family conversations gradually excluded me. I would enter a room where my 3 children were talking, and they would immediately change the subject or fall silent. When I asked what they were discussing, Thomas would say, "Nothing important, Dad," in a tone that made it clear I wasn't welcome in their discussion. They created a family chat group on their phones and never invited me to join. Mealtimes, which had once been opportunities for family bonding, became battlegrounds. One evening, I spent 3 hours making my special lasagna, Maria's recipe that the kids had always loved. When I proudly served it, Thomas took one bite and pushed his plate away. "This is too heavy and old-fashioned, Dad. Haven't you heard of keto? No one eats carbs like this anymore." His words stung more than he could know, an insult not just to my cooking but to Maria's memory. Sophia began complaining about my presence in ways both subtle and direct. If I was watching television in the living room when she came home, she would sigh loudly and ask if I really needed to have the volume so high. If I was puttering in the garden on weekend mornings, she would come outside in her pajamas to tell me the noise was disturbing her sleep. My very existence in my own home seemed to irritate her. Aaron, my youngest, the one I thought I had the closest bond with, developed a new pattern of behavior. He would leave early in the morning before I woke up and return late at night after I had gone to bed. On the rare occasions we were home at the same time, he wore headphones and kept his eyes fixed on his computer screen. When I asked about his work or his friends, he would give one-word answers and quickly find a reason to retreat to his room. One afternoon in April, I returned from grocery shopping earlier than expected. As I approached the front door, I heard unfamiliar voices inside. Quietly entering, I discovered a woman in a business suit walking through my living room, making notes on a tablet. Thomas and Sophia were trailing behind her, pointing out features of the house. "The kitchen could definitely be modernized," the woman was saying, "and these walls could come down to create an open concept space that buyers love." I stood frozen in the doorway, grocery bags hanging from my hands. "What's going on here?" I asked, my voice shakier than I intended. Thomas looked startled, then composed himself. "Dad, this is just a consultation. We're considering some renovations." But the woman handed me her business card before leaving. Linda Patterson, real estate consultant. They weren't planning renovations. They were planning to sell my home. When I confronted them that evening, the lies continued. "We just wanted to know the value of the property for future planning," Sophia insisted. "It's important to stay informed about the market." Aaron sat silently, staring at his plate during the entire conversation. I knew they weren't telling me the truth, but I couldn't understand why they would lie about something so important. My suspicions grew when I checked our joint bank account, the one I had set up to cover household expenses. For years, I had been the only one depositing money into it, but I gave all 3 children access in case of emergencies. The balance was $2,000 lower than it should have been. When I reviewed the transactions, I found a large withdrawal made by Thomas 3 days earlier. When questioned, he claimed it was for home maintenance, but couldn't provide details or receipts. The final confirmation came on a Tuesday evening when I went to the basement to fix the water heater. The kids thought I was out at my weekly poker game with old construction buddies, but I had come home early when Frank called to cancel. As I approached the basement stairs, I heard their voices drifting up from below. "We need to figure out what to do about Dad," Thomas was saying, his voice clear in the quiet house. "The real estate agent says we could get at least $400,000 for this place if we renovate the kitchen and bathrooms," Sophia replied. "But what about Dad? We can't just throw him out," Aaron's voice, showing the first concern I'd heard from him in months. Thomas's response chilled me to the bone. "I found a nice retirement community about 20 miles from here. Affordable, good reviews online. It's time we solve our old man problem and move on with our lives." I retreated silently to my room, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the doorknob. My own children were plotting to remove me from my home, the home I had bought with decades of savings, the home where I had kept Maria's memory alive. That night, I lay awake until dawn, trying to understand how the children I had sacrificed everything for could betray me so completely. The morning everything changed began like any other. I woke up at 6:30, just as I had done for decades, my body still adhering to the schedule of a working man despite 3 years of retirement. The house was quiet as I shuffled to the kitchen in my slippers, the ones Sophia had given me 2 Christmases ago. I started the coffee machine and began preparing breakfast for everyone, a habit I couldn't break even after discovering their betrayal. I made blueberry pancakes from scratch, knowing they were Aaron's favorite since childhood. I scrambled eggs with cheese the way Thomas preferred, and cut up fresh fruit for Sophia, who was always talking about eating healthy. Setting the table for 4, I placed the maple syrup in the center, Maria's china plates perfectly arranged with matching silverware. One final normal morning, though they didn't know it yet. Strangely, all 3 of my children appeared in the kitchen at the same time, just as I was pouring coffee into their mugs. They never came to breakfast together anymore, their schedules and preferences pulling them in different directions. Thomas usually grabbed toast on his way out the door. Sophia rarely ate breakfast at all. Aaron typically slept until noon when he wasn't required to be on an early video call. The unusual synchronicity of their arrival should have warned me, but I was simply happy to see them all at once. "Good morning. I made everyone's favorites," I said cheerfully, gesturing to the spread on the table. None of them sat down. Thomas remained standing by the doorway, arms crossed over his chest. Sophia leaned against the counter, avoiding my eyes. Aaron shifted his weight from foot to foot, looking uncomfortable. "Dad, we need to talk," Thomas began, his voice formal and distant, like he was addressing an employee rather than his father. "We've made some decisions about the house." My heart started racing, but I pretended not to understand. "About renovations? I told you, I don't think we need to change anything right now. The house is still in good condition." Sophia stepped forward, her expression a practiced mask of sympathy that didn't reach her eyes. "It's not about renovations, Dad. We've decided it's time to sell the house." I set down the coffee pot carefully, afraid my trembling hands would drop it. "Sell the house? But this is our home. I bought this house for us to live as a family." "Times change, Dad," Thomas continued, taking control of the conversation as he always did. "We've found a great place for you to live. It's a retirement community called Golden Sunset Acres. They have activities, medical staff on site, and people your own age to socialize with." The name alone made me wince. Golden Sunset Acres. A place where old people went to wait for death, removed from society and family. I don't want to live in a retirement home. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself right here. It's not up for discussion, Thomas said firmly. We've already put down a deposit to hold a spot for you. You need to be out of here by next Monday. 5 days. They were giving me 5 days to leave the home I had purchased with my life savings, the home where every corner held memories of Maria and our life together. I looked at each of their faces, searching for some sign of the children I had raised, some flicker of love or remorse. This is my house, I said, my voice stronger now, as anger began to override shock. I paid for it. My name is on the deed. You can't force me to leave. Aaron finally spoke, his voice flat and emotionless. Dad, we've looked into this. You put the house in all our names years ago, remember? For inheritance purposes. We legally have the right to sell. I didn't remember doing this. Had I signed something during those grief-stricken months after Maria died? Had I been trying to protect them in case something happened to me? My memory of that dark time was foggy, clouded by loss and exhaustion. But why? I asked, my voice breaking. Why would you do this to me? I've given you everything. I paid for your education, your food, your clothes. I'm still paying all the bills for this house even though you're all working adults. Why would you throw me away like this? The mask of fake concern dropped from Sophia's face, revealing the cold stranger beneath. Because you're in the way, Dad. We want to live our lives without having to tiptoe around you. We want to redecorate without hearing about how Mom would have wanted things. We want to use this house as an asset instead of a museum to the past. Thomas nodded in agreement. We appreciate what you did for us when we were kids. Really, we do. But that was your job as a parent. You don't get a medal for doing what you were supposed to do. Your job is done, Aaron added, not meeting my eyes. We're adults now. We don't need you anymore. I stood there in my kitchen, surrounded by the breakfast I had lovingly prepared, listening to my children dismiss decades of sacrifice as merely a job that was now complete. The pain was physical, a crushing weight on my chest that made it hard to breathe. I gave up everything for you, I whispered. After your mother died, I could have started over, found someone new, lived my own life. Instead, I devoted everything to you three, and we're saying thank you, Thomas replied coldly. Thank you. Now go away. We don't need you anymore. Sophia pointed to a suitcase that had been placed by the kitchen door, one I hadn't noticed when I first got up. We've packed some of your clothes and toiletries. You can come back for the rest of your things later this week. They had packed a suitcase for me while I slept, planning my expulsion from my own home like burglars plotting a robbery. I looked down at the food on the table, growing cold and untouched. Had they ever appreciated anything I did for them? Had they been calculating this betrayal for months while eating the meals I cooked and wearing the clothes I washed? Where am I supposed to go today? Right now? I asked, reality setting in. The retirement home isn't expecting me until next week, you said. Thomas pulled out his wallet and extracted 3 $100 bills. Here's $300 for a hotel until you can move in. We'll forward the rest of your pension checks to your new address. $300. That's what my lifetime of parenting was worth to them. Not even enough for a decent hotel for the full 5 days. As if reading my thoughts, Aaron muttered, There's a budget inn off the highway that's pretty cheap. I took the money mechanically, too numb to argue anymore. In a daze, I walked to my bedroom to change out of my pajamas. Sophia followed me, standing in the doorway as if making sure I didn't take anything valuable. As I changed into jeans and a sweater, I noticed a small framed photo of Maria on my nightstand. I reached for it, but Sophia stepped forward. We're keeping the family photos here, she said. They belong to all of us. Even Maria was being taken from me. I had no fight left in me at that moment, only a hollow, echoing pain. I walked past Sophia without looking at her, down the hallway where school photos of the kids still hung, through the living room where we had celebrated 20 Christmases, and out the front door of the home I had worked my entire life to provide. As I stood on the porch with a single suitcase and $300 in my pocket, Thomas closed the door behind me without another word. No goodbye, No thank you for the breakfast, still sitting on the table. No acknowledgement of the life I had given them. Just a door closing on 40 years of fatherhood. The Budget Inn was exactly as depressing as its name suggested. Located just off the highway, the two-story motel featured peeling paint, a flickering neon sign, and the constant rumble of trucks passing by. The front desk clerk barely looked up from his phone as I paid for 3 nights in advance, using most of the money my children had given me. He handed me a plastic keycard to room 215, pointing vaguely toward a rusting exterior staircase. The room itself was small and smelled of stale cigarettes, despite the no smoking sign on the door. A queen-sized bed with a sagging mattress occupied most of the space, covered by a thin polyester comforter with an outdated floral pattern. The carpet was worn thin in pathways to the bathroom and door. A small desk with a wobbly chair sat beneath a window with broken blinds. A television that might have been cutting edge in the early 2000s was bolted to the wall. I set my suitcase on the bed and opened it to see what my children had packed for me. A few shirts, most of them old ones I wore for yard work. 2 pairs of pants, underwear and socks, mismatched. A toothbrush, but no toothpaste. My blood pressure medication, but none of my other prescriptions. It was clear they had spent minimal time considering what I might need. Sitting on the edge of the bed, the events of the morning finally caught up with me. My hands began to shake uncontrollably, and hot tears spilled down my cheeks. For the first time since Maria died, I sobbed openly, the kind of raw, guttural crying that comes from the deepest part of your soul. I cried for the love I had given so freely that had been thrown back in my face. I cried for Maria, wondering if our children would have turned out differently if she had lived. I cried for the lonely future stretching ahead of me, discarded by the very people I had sacrificed everything for. When the tears finally subsided, I lay down on the uncomfortable mattress and stared at the water-stained ceiling. The walls of the small room seemed to close in around me, a far cry from the spacious home I had woken up in that morning. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional flush of a toilet in a neighboring room or the ice machine clanking down the walkway. As darkness fell outside, I realized I hadn't eaten anything since the coffee I'd sipped while making breakfast. The breakfast none of my children had bothered to eat before evicting me. My stomach growled, but I had no appetite. Instead, I continued lying there, replaying my children's cold faces and cruel words over and over in my mind. Something Thomas had said kept nagging at me. You put the house in all our names years ago, remember? For inheritance purposes. Had I really done that? In the fog of grief after Maria's death, I had met with a lawyer to update my will, wanting to make sure the children would be provided for if something happened to me. But I couldn't remember transferring the deed to include them while I was still alive. Around midnight, an idea flickered in my mind, a small spark of hope in the darkness. I reached for my phone, scrolling through contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Frank Delaney. Frank had been my poker buddy for 15 years, a retired construction worker like me, but before that, he had been a real estate attorney. If anyone would know the truth about my house, it would be Frank. Despite the late hour, I sent him a text. Frank, it's Emilio. Emergency situation. Need to talk about my house deed. Can you meet tomorrow? His response came within minutes. Of course. Coffee shop on Main Street, 9 a.m. Everything okay? I responded simply, no, but hopefully it will be. Thank you. That tiny thread of hope gave me enough energy to get up, wash my face, and make a plan. I rummaged through my wallet and found what I was looking for, my safe deposit box key. The box at First National Bank contained all my important documents, including the original deed to the house. My children didn't know about the box. It was something Maria and I had set up early in our marriage. The next morning, I met Frank at the coffee shop, a small local place we often visited after our poker games. Frank was already there when I arrived, his silver hair neatly combed, a concerned expression on his lined face. I must have looked terrible after my sleepless night because his eyes widened when he saw me. Jesus, Emilio, what happened to you? He asked, as I slid into the booth across from him. Over the next hour, I poured out the whole story. the changes in my children's behavior, discovering them bringing a real estate agent through the house, overhearing their plans to send me to Golden Sunset Acres, the ambush at breakfast, and my unceremonious ejection from my own home. Frank listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. When I finished, he leaned forward. "Let me get this straight. They claimed you put the house in all their names years ago, and they're trying to sell it out from under you?" I nodded, throat tight with emotion. "Thomas said I did it for inheritance purposes after Maria died. But I don't remember doing that, Frank. I was a mess back then, so maybe I did, but it doesn't sound like something I would do." Frank shook his head firmly. "No, you wouldn't have. I know because I'm the one who helped you with those documents after Maria passed. You updated your will to name the kids as beneficiaries, yes, but you never transferred the deed. That house is solely in your name, Emilio." A surge of hope rushed through me. "You're sure?" "Positive. But let's verify. Do you have access to the original deed? Safe deposit box at First National." I was planning to go there next. Frank checked his watch. "Bank opens in 20 minutes. Let's finish our coffee and head over there together. If what I suspect is true, your kids aren't just being cruel, they're attempting to defraud you." At the bank, a young woman led us to the safe deposit box room. With slightly trembling hands, I inserted my key into the lock and opened the metal box. Inside were all the important documents of my life. Maria's and my marriage certificate, her death certificate, life insurance policies, birth certificates for all 3 children, and, most importantly, the deed to the house. Frank took the document, reviewing it carefully. After a few minutes, he looked up, a grim smile on his face. "Just as I thought. This house is solely in your name, Emilio. You never added your children to the deed. They have no legal right to sell it or evict you." Relief flooded through me, followed quickly by anger. They lied to me. They knew I didn't remember clearly what happened during that time, and they used that against me. Frank's expression hardened. "This goes beyond a family dispute. This is elder abuse and attempted fraud. They tried to steal your home, Emilio. What should I do? First, we need to secure the property legally. I'm retired, but I still have my license and connections. We'll file a formal eviction notice against them." Evict my own children? The idea seemed unthinkable just 24 hours ago, but now it felt like justice. "They were willing to throw you away without a second thought, Emilio. They don't get to profit from your life's work." Frank pulled out his phone. "I know a judge who can expedite the paperwork. By tomorrow, we'll have legal documents ordering them to vacate the premises." As Frank made calls, I sat quietly, a plan forming in my mind. I didn't just want my house back. I wanted my children to understand the consequences of their actions. I wanted them to feel the same fear and uncertainty they had forced upon me. But more than revenge, I wanted them to learn the lesson I had apparently failed to teach them: the importance of gratitude, respect, and family loyalty. By afternoon, Frank had arranged everything. Judge Williams, an old friend of his, had reviewed the deed and signed an emergency eviction notice, giving my children 72 hours to vacate the property. The sheriff's department agreed to accompany us to serve the papers the following morning. That night, back in my depressing motel room, I slept soundly for the first time since being thrown out. I dreamed of Maria, her gentle smile as she watched over our young children playing in the backyard. In the dream, she turned to me and said something I couldn't quite hear, but her expression was resolute and supportive. I woke up feeling her presence, believing she would approve of what I was about to do. The next day dawned bright and clear, as if nature itself was supporting my cause. I met Frank outside the sheriff's office, where Deputy Rodriguez was waiting for us. The young officer reviewed the paperwork one final time before nodding. "Everything's in order, Mr. Ramirez. We'll follow you to the property and ensure the eviction notice is served properly." As we drove toward the house, my house, I felt a strange mixture of emotions: sadness that it had come to this, anger at my children's betrayal, determination to reclaim what was rightfully mine. And underneath it all, a small, quiet hope that perhaps this shock would wake them up, help them become the people Maria and I had raised them to be. The cruiser pulled up behind my car as we parked in the driveway of the colonial home I had purchased with decades of hard work. Through the front window, I could see movement inside, my children going about their day, probably still congratulating themselves on so efficiently removing their troublesome father from their lives. They had no idea what was coming. Frank, Deputy Rodriguez, and I approached the front door together. My hand hesitated for a moment before pressing the doorbell. It felt strange to ring the bell of my own home, but I was no longer a resident there according to my children. The chime echoed inside, followed by footsteps approaching the door. Thomas opened it, dressed in pressed slacks and a button-down shirt, as if preparing to leave for work. His expression shifted rapidly from neutral to shocked when he saw me standing between Frank and a uniformed sheriff's deputy. "Dad? What is this?" His voice had lost the commanding tone he had used when evicting me, replaced by confusion and the first hints of alarm. Deputy Rodriguez stepped forward professionally. "Thomas Ramirez? I'm Deputy Rodriguez from the County Sheriff's Department. I'm here to serve you and the other occupants of this residence with an eviction notice." He held out the official document, its county seal clearly visible at the top. Thomas didn't take the paper, his hand frozen halfway in the air. "Eviction? There must be some mistake. This is our house." "Actually, it's not," I said, finding strength in the truth. "The house is solely in my name. It always has been." The color drained from Thomas's face. "That's not possible. You told us." "I never told you anything of the sort," I interrupted. "You lied to me, counting on my grief-clouded memories of that time after your mother died. But the deed is clear. This house belongs to me alone." Sophia appeared behind Thomas, drawn by the commotion. "What's going on? Dad?" Her eyes widened when she saw the deputy. "Why is there a police officer here?" Deputy Rodriguez repeated his introduction and attempted again to hand over the eviction notice. This time, Thomas snatched it from his hand, scanning the document with increasingly frantic eyes. "This can't be legal," he sputtered, looking to Frank. "Who are you?" "Frank Delaney, retired real estate attorney," Frank replied calmly. "I verified the property records myself. The deed is solely in your father's name. You and your siblings have no legal claim to this property." Sophia grabbed the paper from Thomas, her perfectly manicured nails crumpling the edges as she read. 72 hours? We're supposed to be out in 3 days? That's impossible." "It was possible for me," I reminded her. "You gave me less than 1 hour to leave with a single suitcase." By now, Aaron had joined his siblings at the door, his usual indifference replaced by genuine panic. "What's happening?" he asked, looking between all of us. Deputy Rodriguez took control of the situation. "I need all occupants of the house present for this notification." He addressed Aaron directly. "This is an official eviction notice requiring all of you to vacate these premises within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in forced removal and potential legal consequences." The three of them stood frozen in the doorway, the reality of the situation slowly sinking in. I felt no joy in their distress, only a sad vindication that justice was being served. "You can't do this to us," Thomas finally said, attempting to regain his composure. "We'll fight this in court." Frank shook his head. "You'd lose. The property records are clear. Additionally, attempting to defraud your father by claiming partial ownership could result in criminal charges. I'd advise against that route." Deputy Rodriguez pulled out his notebook. "I need to confirm the names of all occupants." He looked at Thomas. "You are Thomas Ramirez, correct?" Thomas nodded mutely. The deputy continued, "And you are Sophia Ramirez? And you are Aaron Ramirez?" My other children confirmed their identities in subdued voices. "I'm officially serving you with this eviction notice," the deputy continued. "You have until 10 a.m. this Friday to remove yourselves and your personal belongings from these premises. The owner," he nodded toward me, "has the right to reclaim his property at that time. Do you understand these terms?" None of them responded immediately, still processing the shocking reversal of their plans. Deputy Rodriguez repeated his question more firmly. "Do you understand these terms?" "Yes," Thomas finally muttered, with Sophia and Aaron echoing him a moment later. "Good," the deputy said. "Mr. Ramirez, is there anything else you need from me at this time?" I shook my head. "No. Thank you for your assistance." As Deputy Rodriguez returned to his cruiser, I remained standing on the porch with Frank. My children had retreated slightly into the foyer but still blocked the entrance, as if afraid I would push past them and reclaim my home immediately. "Dad," Sophia began, her voice taking on the wheedling tone she had used as a teenager when asking for money. "We can work something out. This is just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I repeated, incredulous. "You told me to my face that my parenting was just a job that was finished. You said, and I quote, 'Thank you. Now go away. We don't need you anymore.' That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was cruelty. We were just trying to do what's best for everyone," Thomas argued, though his voice lacked conviction. "Golden Sunset Acres has activities and people your age. If you were so concerned about what's best for me, you would have discussed it with me," I replied. "Instead, you conspired behind my back and threw me out of my own home with nothing but a suitcase and $300. Aaron, always the quietest, finally spoke up. "So what happens now? Where are we supposed to go in 3 days?" The irony of his question wasn't lost on any of us. It was exactly what I had asked them when they evicted me. "I suggest you start packing and looking for apartments," I said simply. "But the rental market is terrible right now," Sophia protested. "We can't find places that quickly. Can't we work out some arrangement? Maybe we divide the house? You take the master suite, and we take the other rooms? Like roommates?" I asked. "Number, I want my home back. All of it." Thomas, always calculating, tried a different approach. "What about a rental agreement? We could pay you market rate to stay here. It would give you income in your retirement." The suggestion had merit from a practical standpoint, but I wasn't ready to concede. "I'll consider options for the future. For now, the eviction stands. Friday, 10 a.m. Sophia began to cry, tears that seemed more from frustration than genuine remorse. "Dad, please, we're your children. You wouldn't really make us homeless, would you?" "You were willing to do exactly that to me," I reminded her. "The difference is that you're young, employed adults with resources. I'm a retired man on a fixed income whom you tried to discard." Thomas made one last attempt. "At least give us more time. 30 days is standard for evictions." Frank intervened. The judge granted an expedited eviction based on the fraudulent claims and elder abuse factors. 72 hours is legally binding. I looked at each of my children's faces, searching for genuine remorse rather than just shock at having their plans upended. I saw fear, anger, and confusion, but no real understanding of the pain they had caused me. "I'll be back on Friday morning," I said finally. "One more thing you should know. There will be another surprise waiting for you tomorrow. Something that will help you understand the consequences of your actions more clearly." "What does that mean?" Aaron asked, alarm evident in his voice. "You'll find out," I replied, turning to leave. "Pack your things. Anything left in the house after 10 a.m. Friday becomes mine again." As Frank and I walked back to our cars, I heard the front door slam behind us, followed by the raised voices of my children arguing among themselves. The sound held no satisfaction for me, only sadness that it had come to this. "Are you sure about the next part of the plan?" Frank asked as we reached our vehicles. "It's not too late to reconsider." I nodded firmly. "They need to learn that actions have consequences. This isn't just about the house anymore." Frank clasped my shoulder supportively. "I'll have the paperwork ready for the trust transfer first thing tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. at the notary's office on Elm Street." As I drove back to the Budget Inn, for what would hopefully be my final night there, I felt no triumph or vindication, just a quiet certainty that I was doing what needed to be done, not just for myself but for my children too. They had forgotten the values Maria and I had tried to instill in them. Perhaps this harsh lesson would help them remember. The morning after serving the eviction notice, I woke up early in my motel room, a sense of purpose driving me despite another night on the uncomfortable mattress. Today was the day I would implement the second phase of my plan, the bigger surprise I had alluded to when leaving my children. I showered quickly in the tiny bathroom, with its weak water pressure and thin towels, then dressed in the best clothes I had available in my hastily packed suitcase. I needed to look presentable today, authoritative even. This wasn't just about reclaiming my property, it was about reshaping my relationship with my children in a way that demanded respect. Frank was waiting for me outside the notary's office on Elm Street, a thick folder of documents under his arm. Despite being retired, he had called in favors and worked late into the night to prepare everything we needed. His dedication reminded me that while my children had betrayed me, I still had true friends who valued our relationship. "Morning, Emilio," he greeted me. "Everything's prepared. Jenkins is ready for us." Jenkins was the notary, another poker buddy who had agreed to come in early specifically for this appointment. Inside, we were led to a small conference room where Jenkins waited with his official stamps and seals. The documents Frank had prepared were spread across the table, sticky tabs marking where signatures were needed. "Are you absolutely certain about this, Emilio?" Frank asked one final time. "Once these papers are signed and filed, it will be difficult to undo." I nodded firmly. I've never been more certain of anything. They need to learn this lesson. For the next hour, I signed document after document, transferring ownership of my house from my name individually to the newly created Ramirez Family Trust. The trust had specific conditions and terms that would fundamentally change how the property could be used and who would benefit from it. Frank explained each page carefully, ensuring I understood every legal implication before signing. By 10:30, it was done. The notary applied his official seal to the final document and handed the originals to Frank, who would file them with the county recorder's office immediately. The trust was established, and my house was no longer simply my personal property but an asset with strings attached. As we left the notary's office, my phone buzzed with text messages from all three children. They had been trying to reach me since dawn, their messages growing increasingly desperate as the reality of the eviction sank in. "Thomas, Dad, we need to talk about this rationally. Call me as soon as possible." Sophia, "Please, Dad, I've been calling everywhere trying to find an apartment, but there's nothing available on such short notice." Aaron, "Dad, I'm sorry about what happened. Can we meet to discuss options?" I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I texted all three simultaneously. "Be at the house at 2 p.m. today. We'll discuss the future then." Frank drove me to a late breakfast at a local diner, where we reviewed the next steps of the plan. "Are you ready to face them again?" he asked as we finished our coffee. "They won't take this well." "I know," I replied, "but sometimes the hardest lessons are the most necessary ones." After breakfast, Frank dropped me off at a nearby park, where I spent a few hours walking the trails, gathering my thoughts and strength for the confrontation ahead. The peaceful surroundings helped calm my nerves and reinforce my resolve. What I was doing might seem harsh, but it was ultimately for their own good. They needed to understand that actions have consequences, that relationships require respect and reciprocity. At 1:45, I arrived back at my house. The property looked different somehow, as if my brief absence and the legal changes had transformed it physically. 3 cars were already parked in the driveway, confirming all my children were inside, waiting anxiously for my arrival. I paused before approaching the front door, taking a deep breath and touching the wedding ring I still wore 12 years after Maria's death. "Give me strength," I whispered, a habit I'd developed when facing difficult situations without her by my side. This time, I didn't ring the doorbell. I used my key, asserting my rightful ownership from the very beginning. The door swung open to reveal all 3 of my children sitting tensely in the living room, their faces a mixture of anxiety and forced conciliation. Thomas stood immediately, adopting his professional negotiator stance. "Dad, thank you for coming. We've been discussing options that might work for everyone. I ignored his opening and walked to the armchair that had always been mine, the one they had probably planned to discard once I was gone. Sitting down deliberately, I placed a thick manila envelope on the coffee table between us. "Before you start with whatever script you've prepared," I said calmly, "there's something you need to know. The situation has changed since yesterday." Sophia leaned forward eagerly, hope flashing across her face. "You're reconsidering the eviction?" "No," I replied firmly. "The eviction still stands. You have until 10 a.m. tomorrow to remove yourselves and your belongings from this property." Their faces fell in unison, the briefly kindled hope extinguished. "Then what's changed?" Aaron asked, eyeing the envelope suspiciously. I pushed the envelope toward them. "Open it." Thomas took the envelope and extracted the documents inside, his brow furrowing as he read the first page. "Ramirez Family Trust?" He looked up, confused. "What is this?" "The surprise I mentioned yesterday," I explained. "As of this morning, I no longer own this house personally. I've transferred ownership to a trust." "A trust?" Sophia repeated, peering over Thomas's shoulder at the documents. "I don't understand." "It's quite simple," I said. "The house now belongs to the Ramirez Family Trust, which has very specific terms about how the property can be used and who benefits from it." Thomas flipped through the pages, his expression darkening as he read. "This says the house will be rented at market value. Profits go to charity. Family members can rent at standard rates." He looked up sharply. "You're turning our home into a rental property?" "Not just any rental property," I clarified. "The income will go directly to the Maria Ramirez Memorial Fund, which will support organizations helping elderly people who have been abandoned or mistreated by their families." The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Sophia's face flushed with embarrassment. Aaron looked at the floor, and Thomas continued flipping through the documents with increasing agitation. "According to this," Thomas continued, "family members have first right to rent the property but must pay market rate and sign standard one-year leases with all normal tenant responsibilities." "That's correct," I confirmed. "If you wish to continue living here, you'll need to apply as tenants, provide security deposits, pass credit checks, and pay monthly rent, just like any other renters." "You can't be serious," Sophia protested. "You want us to pay to live in our family home?" "It's not your family home," I corrected her. "It never was. It was my home that I generously allowed you to live in rent-free, even as adults with good jobs. Now, it's a trust property with clear legal terms." Aaron, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke up. "How much would the rent be?" I named a figure that represented the current market rate for similar properties in the neighborhood. All three of them blanched. "That's almost as much as my monthly salary," Sophia exclaimed. "Welcome to the real world of housing costs," I replied. "The same costs I've been covering for all of you while you spent your salaries on whatever you wanted." Thomas, always looking for angles, studied the documents more closely. "There must be a way around this. The trust can be dissolved or the terms changed." Frank had prepared me for this reaction. "The trust is irrevocable," I informed them. "The terms cannot be changed, even by me. That's the point of such a trust. So either we pay this exorbitant rent or we move out tomorrow," Thomas summarized, anger evident in his voice. "Those are your options," I confirmed. "And if you choose to apply as tenants, you should know that the property manager will be strictly enforcing all lease terms. Late payments, property damage, or lease violations will result in immediate eviction proceedings." "Property manager?" Aaron asked. "Who's that?" "Frank Delaney," I replied. "He's coming out of retirement specifically to manage this property for the trust." The realization that they would be dealing with Frank, who had already demonstrated his willingness to take legal action against them, visibly unsettled all three. "This is vindictive," Thomas accused. "You're punishing us." "No," I corrected him. "I'm teaching you something your mother and I apparently failed to instill: respect, gratitude, and the understanding that actions have consequences." Sophia began to cry, but unlike yesterday, These tears seemed genuine. "Where are we supposed to go? We can't find apartments that quickly, and we can't afford the rent you're asking." For a moment, my resolve wavered. They were still my children, despite everything. But then I remembered the cold dismissal in their eyes when they evicted me, the casual cruelty of their words. "Thank you, now go away. We don't need you anymore." "You should have thought about that before you threw me out of my own home," I said quietly. "Perhaps you can help each other, pool your resources for a shared apartment. That's what family is supposed to do, after all. Support each other in times of need." Aaron looked up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. "You really want us gone, don't you? After everything?" "What I want," I replied carefully, "is for my children to understand the value of what they so carelessly discarded. Not just the house, but the relationship with their father. Maybe someday, when you've experienced what it means to work for what you have, to pay your own way in the world without taking advantage of others, we can rebuild what was broken here." Thomas threw the documents back onto the coffee table. "This is insane. We're your children." "Yes," I agreed, "you are. And as your father, it's still my job to teach you important life lessons. This is one you clearly need to learn." The meeting ended shortly after that, with no resolution beyond the clear understanding that they would be moving out the next morning. As they left, one by one, I saw a mixture of emotions on their faces: anger, betrayal, fear, and perhaps, just perhaps, the first glimmerings of understanding. When I was alone in the house again, I walked slowly through each room, touching familiar surfaces, remembering happier times. The house felt empty already, as if the spirit of family had departed long before the physical eviction. Tomorrow, I would reclaim my home, but something precious had been lost that might never be recovered. Yet as I stood in the kitchen where Maria and I had prepared countless family meals, I felt a sense of peace beneath the sadness. What I had done was necessary and right. Sometimes love means setting boundaries and holding people accountable, even when it breaks your heart to do so. 2 years have passed since that day I reclaimed my home and established the Ramirez Family Trust. Much has changed, both in my life and in my relationships with my children. The journey has been difficult at times, painful even, but also healing in ways I couldn't have anticipated. After the eviction, I didn't move back into the house immediately. The memories there were too raw, too tainted by betrayal. Instead, I rented a small one-bedroom apartment near the beach, a peaceful place where the constant sound of waves helped soothe my wounded spirit. The house was leased to a young family with 2 small children, their rent payments going directly to the Maria Ramirez Memorial Fund, as stipulated by the trust. The fund has become something I'm deeply proud of. In just 2 years, it has raised enough money to help establish a support network for elderly individuals who have been abandoned or mistreated by their families. We provide emergency housing, legal assistance, and emotional support to seniors in crisis. Maria would have loved this work. She always had a special tenderness for the elderly, often visiting nursing homes to read to residents when our children were small. My children's paths diverged significantly after leaving the family home. Thomas, true to his practical nature, quickly found an apartment across town. It was smaller than he was accustomed to, and significantly more expensive, absorbing a large portion of his salary. The experience of paying market-rate rent for the first time at 35 years old was a shock to his system. No longer able to save most of his income while living expense-free in my home, he had to learn budgeting skills most people develop in their 20s. Sophia struggled the most initially. Her marketing job, while prestigious, didn't pay as well as she had led everyone to believe. Without free housing, she couldn't maintain the lifestyle she had become accustomed to. She moved in with a coworker temporarily, sleeping on a pull-out sofa while searching for an affordable apartment. The humbling experience of depending on someone else's charity gave her a new perspective on gratitude and interdependence. Aaron, surprisingly, adapted most quickly. He found a small studio apartment near his tech company and embraced minimalist living. His remote work arrangement allowed him flexibility, and he seemed to appreciate the independence after years of living under the same roof as his siblings and me. Of the three, he was the only one who didn't attempt to contact me in the months immediately following the eviction. For 6 months, I had no direct communication with any of my children. I heard updates occasionally through mutual friends or distant relatives, but I maintained my distance, allowing the lesson to sink in fully. Those months were lonely at times, but also freeing. I joined a senior center near my new apartment, made friends, took up painting classes, and even started dating a kind widow named Eleanor, who shared my love of classic movies. The first breakthrough came unexpectedly. I was shopping at the local supermarket when I literally bumped carts with Thomas in the produce section. We both froze, the months of separation creating an awkward tension between us. Then, to my surprise, he asked if I would be willing to get coffee and talk. Something in his expression had changed, a hardness gone from his eyes, replaced by what seemed like genuine humility. Over coffee at a nearby cafe, Thomas admitted that losing the security of free housing had forced him to confront many truths about himself. "I took you for granted, Dad," he said, stirring his coffee nervously. "I never appreciated what you provided because I never had to work for it myself." He explained that his rent and utilities now consumed nearly half his monthly income, giving him newfound respect for how much I had shouldered all those years. A month later, Sophia reached out via email. Her message was long and emotional, detailing her struggles to find affordable housing and the lessons she had learned about financial independence. "I always thought I was successful," she wrote, "but now I realize I was just privileged. You gave me a safety net I didn't appreciate until it was gone." She asked if we could meet for lunch, a request I cautiously accepted. Our lunch was tearful but healing. Sophia had changed, the entitled attitude replaced by genuine contrition. She had found a roommate situation that was within her budget, started cooking at home instead of eating out, and was learning to live within her means for the first time. "I'm sorry, Dad," she said, reaching for my hand across the table. "What we did to you was unforgivable." "Not unforgivable," I corrected gently, "just requiring genuine remorse and changed behavior." Aaron remained distant the longest. Nearly a year passed before he sent a text asking if I would be willing to meet. We arranged to have dinner at a neutral location, a restaurant neither of us had visited before. He arrived looking thinner than I remembered, more serious, his usual detachment replaced by a quiet intensity. "I've been angry," he admitted immediately. "Angry at you for the eviction and the trust, angry at Thomas and Sophia for their parts in everything, but mostly angry at myself. I should have stood up for you when they started planning to send you away. I knew it was wrong, but I went along with it." His honesty surprised me. Of my 3 children, Aaron had always been the hardest to read, the most guarded with his emotions. "Why didn't you?" I asked, not accusingly but genuinely curious. He sighed deeply. "Because it was easier not to. Because I was selfish. Because I didn't want to rock the boat." He paused, then added, "The same reasons most people allow bad things to happen when they could speak up." His insight impressed me. Of all my children, Aaron seemed to have done the most soul-searching during our separation. He had used the time to reflect not just on his actions toward me, but on his approach to life and relationships in general. Gradually, carefully, I began rebuilding relationships with each of them. It wasn't immediate forgiveness or an instant return to normalcy. Trust, once broken, requires time and consistent evidence of change to be restored. But slowly, meeting by meeting, conversation by conversation, we found our way back to something resembling family. The trust remained in place. None of my children ever moved back into the family home, and the rent continued to support the memorial fund. This boundary was important, a constant reminder of the lesson they had learned. But our healing didn't depend on physical proximity or financial support. It was built on something more fundamental: mutual respect, honest communication, and earned trust. Today, I still live in my beachside apartment, though I've since bought it rather than renting. I found I preferred the smaller space, the sound of the ocean, and the community I've built here. Thomas visits every other Sunday for dinner, often bringing updates about his new approach to financial planning. Sophia calls regularly and has volunteered several times at Memorial Fund events. Aaron and I meet monthly at a chess club, where our quiet competition has become a comfortable ritual. The greatest change has been within me. The betrayal by my children broke something in my heart that will never completely heal. But from that brokenness emerged a stronger, more independent version of myself. I learned that giving everything to your children doesn't necessarily create gratitude or character. Sometimes, the greatest gift you can offer is the opportunity for them to earn their own way, to experience consequences, and to grow from their mistakes. Would Maria approve of how everything unfolded? I believe she would. Not the pain or the separation, but the ultimate lesson and the healing that followed. She always said that true love isn't about making people comfortable. It's about helping them become their best selves, even when that process is uncomfortable. If there's one thing I would tell others who might find themselves in similar situations, it's this. Love doesn't mean allowing yourself to be taken advantage of. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for healthy relationships. And sometimes, the people who need to learn these lessons the most are the ones closest to you. Life continues to unfold in unexpected ways. Eleanor and I are discussing marriage next spring. The Memorial Fund is expanding to new communities. My relationship with my children continues to evolve, sometimes with steps backward, but mostly moving forward towards something more authentic than what we had before. The house that was once the center of our family drama is just a house now, a piece of property generating income for a good cause. The true home exists in the rebuilt relationships, the hard-earned wisdom, and the recognition that family bonds are not automatic but must be nurtured with respect and reciprocity. As I sit on my balcony watching the sunset over the ocean, I often reflect on the journey that brought me here. It wasn't the retirement I had imagined, but perhaps it's the one I needed. In losing what I thought was important, I found what truly matters. Have you ever had to teach someone a difficult lesson about gratitude or respect? How did you handle it, and what was the outcome? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this tale of family, betrayal, and healing resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of life's unexpected lessons. Remember to share with someone who might need to hear that setting boundaries is an act of love, both for yourself and for others. Thank you for listening. And may you find the courage to stand up for yourself when necessary, and the wisdom to know when forgiveness is the path forward.